Alright, doing a response video, I guess, to a few videos made by JonPaulDorn. Yeah, I don't know. He's made a few videos and focused on mice issues and such, and it's nice that he gives a damn, but really it's a little excessive. So anyway, yeah, the legal stuff just gets so complicated. Nobody really wants to care to pay attention to the details, and so the whole argument with me and Peach is sort of irrelevant because she doesn't even know I don't have a lawyer. I mean, she doesn't understand any of the context. She doesn't care to understand, and that's her prerogative. Like most people, they can reduce things to some kind of simple, he once said, and I don't like him for that, or whatever. I don't know, whatever the conflict that me and Peach we edged up to, and then it just became a full-out lack of respect or whatever. Yeah, so that's what happened. We inched our way there, and then we were all of a sudden there, and so now her rhetoric is whatever it is, and I just don't give a damn. I mean, I just don't have any obligation to defend myself against people who don't even care to, even scratch the surface of reasonable understanding, some sort of qualified understanding of the nuances of the law and the rest of that crap. But anyway, I just figured it was about time I did another update video in the sense of just start from the beginning and just go through it just so you understand the context of why I'm the asshole that I am, or whatever you want to, qualify me as, and why these issues are sort of important, and why I use the tactics I use, and blah, 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 blah. Because it's all right, Well, anyway, I mean, we all have stories, and there's a history, and so I have a story and a history, especially with judges. So anyway, we'll start with the first lawsuit I filed, which was about cigarette taxes. You see, I bought some cigarettes online, and 8 months later, I started getting bills from the state of New Jersey saying I owed tax on those cigarettes. Now, technically, that was correct. States are allowed to play this proprietary tax game. But when you think about it, if there's going to be interstate commerce, there has to be a right to buy stuff out of state. And this whole idea that you're going to discriminate against certain commodities just for tax purposes, just because they're a minority status in the state. They don't have any voting power because they're not in a voting district. I've been through this before, but cigarette smokers are a real exploitable minority because there's no concentration of them anywhere. I mean, unlike even gays, they don't even have like cities that they dominate. So they have no representation in government. And so they're completely at the whim of the majority. The majority can do anything it wants, and there's just no political backlash for it. So anyway, I just said, hey, fuck this shit. This is just too fucking expensive in the first place. I mean, I can't afford the taxes. And in the second place, this is the procedure was bullshit. The state of New Jersey was informed within 2 weeks after I bought the cigarettes. They were actually informed in less than a week. And they didn't get around to sending me bills for 8 months. And so you're saying, well, what's the excuse for that? I mean, why do you let somebody keep buying them when they're doing something you're going to charge them for? They have a right to know. Because I had no idea the cigarette company, there was a federal law that obliged the cigarette company to inform the state of New Jersey when I bought cigarettes from them. They didn't tell me on the website. They didn't say, we're going to tattle on you or any of that shit. And so, but anyway, so I basically filed a lawsuit, and I was just making the simple claim that cigarette taxation is basically cruel and unusual punishment. It has nothing to do, the agenda is not within what you can legally do in terms of a discrimination. The states really aren't allowed to discriminate. Governments aren't allowed to discriminate. They're only allowed to do it in some incidental or accidental way. They're not allowed to do it in some deliberate way. And my argument was simply that I could provide plenty of evidence that the state officials were doing it simply because of the money they could gain, and that it was all about the money. And you could see it. The rhetoric was always some kind of bullshit about we got to lower the number of people smoking or this or that. But you could see in their speeches, you could just see how the money was the real driving force. And that was totally illegitimate, because if you're going to do that, then you have to treat the other minority vices the same way, with the same, contempt, basically. So you'd have to tax alcohol at the same kind of percentages. And we're talking 20% versus 800%. That's how high cigarette taxes are. They're the highest taxed substance on earth. And, it's just silly when you really add it up. And all these arguments were is that there was, the cigarette smokers cost more and all this other bogus nonsense, and none of it is statistically true. Cigarette smokers are a net beneficiary to the economy. They basically pay more in Social Security and health care premiums than they collect in the long run, because they die earlier and quicker, which is very good for a society. And they do it after their most productive years. Generally speaking, they don't die until after they're 60 years old. So they're a real benefit to the economy. So even that truth was ignored in this argument used to steal from cigarette smokers. That's all it was about, is stealing their money. All right, so anyway, that was the simple argument I took to the court. And after a year of fiddling around and all the bullshit, the judge was a Harvard graduate, and he was playing all kinds of games. And so in one meeting he said he didn't have jurisdiction over constitutional issues. And then the opposing lawyer in the case was actually the Deputy Attorney General. Because the government basically defends its own laws. When you say the law is unconstitutional, they have to defend it. And she said the same thing. and I recorded the judge, and he really got pissed off that I recorded him saying that, because I basically caught him in a lie. Because there's no way he could graduate from Harvard and not know that I can raise constitutional issues in state superior court. I mean, you can raise constitutional claims in traffic court. Now, that's the magic of the Constitution, is it applies everywhere. So anyway, and he never retracted that statement until he did his final decision. So he basically closed off for me the right to argue my constitutional rights. And I still don't think it mattered. I mean, I made a pretty good argument anyway, basically just pointing out how this is excessive taxation. It's not proportional to the crime, not proportional to what other vices are taxed, and basically made that argument. So anyway, in his decision, where he basically says he made a mistake and that he does have jurisdiction over constitutional issues, so here he waits until his decision to say I have the right to argue constitutional issues. And so it's kind of ludicrous when you think about it, because it's like, well, what good does that, how can you retract something in your decision? Because I can't act anymore. I have all my power's gone. And so it's like saying I made a catastrophic mistake in the processing of this case, but it doesn't matter, is basically what he said. I mean, he just fluffed it off like it didn't matter, and it was critical to the argument in the case. But anyway, regardless. And so basically he came down, he said something as silly as, this was his response to a claim of cruel and unusual punishment. Let's say you went to a court with an argument that the punishment is cruel and unusual. His response was, the state of New Jersey has the right to tax cigarettes. So he didn't deal with the level of taxation at all, even though that was, like I said, the word excessive like 8 times in my papers. I mean, it was, it was all over my argument. I was arguing that it was excessive taxation, not that the state of New Jersey couldn't tax cigarettes. And so it was just a silly decision. So I appealed it. It pays, another couple $100, another year later, and the appeal court came back with just nothing. They just, I listed 20 items, 20 errors of the judge, the whole thing, and they basically said, no, we're not going to write a decision. And that's some new thing they have now, where they're allowed to do that. And it's just like, well, why don't you just blow up the courts then? Because if there's no accountability, if you can't demand a reasoned decision from judges, then there's no point in having a system, because now they can just pick and choose who they're going to give a decision to. Some people will merit one, some people won't. They can just ignore them and just say, go away, fuck you, and that's it. That's all you're going to get from a judge. And that's just insane. So, of course, I appealed that to the state Supreme Court, who didn't take it, who didn't take the case. I mean, they only take 1 in 1,000 appeals. So, there's no accountability, no justice, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, while this case was going on, I don't want to spend that much time on that one. But anyway, it's hardly a frivolous lawsuit. Obviously, I'm fighting for some basic rights of people not to be exploited by malicious government officials who are lying through their teeth. I mean, it's just obvious. So anyway, and you can see it now with these e-cigarettes. They're keeping these unapproved by the FDA only because this is a real threat to their tax money. And it's not about cigarette smoking. It's about money. So anyway, so the next case was the town case, and this one, so this was going on while the other case was in court. This shit was going on, where I was, working on this search engine stuff at this little directory, and so I pissed off these people, and about 5 or 6 of them, these people, I shouldn't even call them that, these little spammers. Okay, they were people that basically owned little porn sites and these kind, all these kind of sites, and they were basically, engineering, selling, indexing So they were basically taking what was supposed to be a public library card catalog, and they were, because somebody paid them, they were moving the cards around and sticking certain books in the front and that kind of stuff. They were cheating the index. And I called them on it, and so they got pissed off, and so they, said, we got to get this guy, and so that's what they did. So they, researched me where they could. They finally found out who I was, and so they found out that I was associated with the town. I was doing the town website at the time, and they emailed the mayor of the town, and told a whole big story about what a horrible person I was. And so now I had to defend myself against, the mayor's getting emails and he doesn't know who these people are and what it's about, so it's just a nuisance to him. And so somehow now I've got to explain a rather complex circumstance to the mayor of the town why I'm not a disreputable person based on these accusations made by